Hello? It's 7:30. I see you, but I can't hear you. Are you muted?
Yeah, I'm muted. I'm in the airport, so I don't want to see all this background noise.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure you have sound and we're good. Hi, Tish. She's muted.
Hey, Shamika.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Tish, I just got your text. I'll get back to you on that. I think I have a follow-up question.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
So M's in the airport, and I don't want to waste any time. Those who join late, will automatically be muted. Look at you, got your airport headphones, able to be interactive
Girl,
with us.
these are my boyfriend's headphones. Conveniently met up with me at the airport, and I'm over here really looking like somebody, customer service representative with his wall.
You came ready to host this webinar. Okay.
I really look. I'm gonna be like, "Hello, welcome to Target."
So, I wanted to talk to you about why you chose empathy. So, all the lessons people could learn from having an unfaithful parent. How did you end up on empathy? So, how did he lead you to empathy?
Well, so background story. I'm one of 7 children. I'm my mom's only child, but my dad has 6 other kids by 4 other women. And the funny thing is that growing up, you are surrounded by infidelity. You're surrounded by like all of this disloyalty, but you don't know because you're a kid. So when I lived in the Dominican Republic, I vividly remember like my mom would go off to medical school, which she actually ended up dropping out of. But she would go off to medical school, and my dad would have his side chick pick me up, and I would spend the whole day with his side chick like she was my nanny. And now she's the mother of my 2 youngest brothers. So it's just kind of bizarre because in all of that, I learned a lot about, like forgiveness and love and relationships and things like that. Because even though, my dad wasn't shit for the most part on paper, he was still my father. So I couldn't disown him for what he did. But I think it definitely showed me a lot about giving people second chances.
Okay. So, how old were you when you found out like that she wasn't your nanny?
Okay, so when I was living in DR, I lived in DR for about a year, and then I moved back to the States. And when I moved back to the States, my parents were through a divorce, and I actually didn't see my mom for like 18 months. So I went through kindergarten, like did the whole thing with my mom, and then my mom actually moved to Puerto Rico to kind of like situation. So I don't think I really realized going until
Hold on,
found out that I had a
you're
brother
coming
that was a couple of months older than me, and then until
you were coming in choppy. So you
you can't
said
hear me now.
that's better. You said that you were without your mom for like 7 months, and then what did you say?
18 months.
18 months. Okay, and how old were you then?
So I was still 5, so I went through kindergarten and parts of first grade without my mom, and during that time she was like in Puerto Rico, just like picking her life back together, like putting the pieces of her life back together. And it wasn't until probably I was like 10 or 11 when I found out that I had a brother who was a couple of months older than me, and that my younger brother, my brother that comes right after me, or no, my brother that 2 brothers youngest, my second youngest brother, when I found out that his mom has a scar on her forehead that my mom gave her in like the 80s. And I was like, this is too much. Like, he's been rotating the same 5 women for like 2 decades, and they all got kids.
Wow.
So I kind of like pieced it all together, you know, as I started getting older and understanding like dating and boyfriends. And, you know, once I started piecing together my family tree, I was just like, this ain't adding enough. This ain't adding enough.
I had a similar experience. Like you said, you were about 10 or 11. I was 15 when I found out my brother, and I was excited because I always wanted a brother, but it just was like, but wait, I'm 15 and you're 15. How did that happen?
Right.
Yeah. So speaking of siblings, like I always just assumed you were only child, just like I assumed Jay-Z was an only child. Like, you know, when people
Right.
out here getting it, you just don't think about siblings because, like, how are you related to that person?
Right.
How do you navigate your relationship with your siblings now having all this information?
Yeah, so it's actually really funny because even though my dad lives in DR and most of my siblings, except one, lives in DR as well, they all kind of like went off to live their own lives with their mom. So my oldest brother and my oldest sister, both of them, they have the same mom, and they kind of like went off and like did their own thing. So I actually saw my brother for the first time after 11 years last April. My brother and my dad last April, and he like has a wife, and he's like expecting his second child. Like, it's just so crazy to think that it's like I'm an aunt, but I don't feel like it because my dad, being who he was, kind of deprived all of us of those like real sibling relationships. Because when you're a half sibling and when all of the women are, you know, feeling animosity towards each other, there's no way for the kids to really have a relationship. So it was, I'm not going to say, you know, that I'm not an only child, but I definitely grew up like an only child for sure.
Okay. So when do you feel like you processed that having to forgive your dad and growing to understand the dimensions of your family tree was empathy?
I don't know if it was necessarily forgiveness, because I think it was, I was just kind of, I'm just from the school of it's like, that is y'all problem, okay? Like, I don't got nothing to do with this. I mean, I wish my siblings and I were closer. Like, I wish, you know, my dad still lived here. You know, there's a lot of wishes, but it's like I've moved on and I never lacked anything. Like, my grandfather and my uncles and, you know, everybody else in my life kind of stepped up. So I was never like necessarily yearning for a father figure, but, you know, every little girl needs her dad. So nonetheless, I don't think it was necessarily forgiveness. I think once I got cheated on in my relationships, it kind of all came full circle because I understood what my mom was going through, and I understood, you know, why she wasn't there. And I think my relationship with my mom is a lot more strained than my relationship with my dad because, you know, I think as Hispanic women, you're kind of trained that men come and go, and men kind of do their own thing and live life on their own terms. But for my mom to be affected the way that she did and not be around, you know, during ages that I thought were critical, I think hurt our relationship a lot still to this day. So it was more so kind of understanding how his actions had like all of this ripple effect on so many different areas of my life, from my siblings to the way I look at relationships, to the relationship with my mom, you know, to eventually the relationship with like my grandparents and stuff like that. Like, it was, you know, one man and his actions impacted so many people's lives. And that's when it kind of was like, wow, like, this shit is real.
Okay. So I'm glad you brought that up because listening to you say it and thinking about it differently, like it's our stories parallel a lot more than I expected. But when I looked up the definition of empathy, I'm like, oh wait, that's definitely M. And I didn't necessarily see it as far as daddy issues are concerned, but you as a businesswoman and as a coach. Let me see. I wrote it down here. Give me 1 second just to find it again. But I know that empathy is defined as the ability to understand and share feelings of another. So when you are having our Monday night huddles and things of that nature, or even way back when you used to host Melanin Magic, I know that you were really good at understanding what somebody's business problems were and reciprocating that and like, oh, okay, I get that. Here's what you You do. So how do you feel like that's something that kind of grew out of that? Like once you grew to understand your mom and you didn't have that same different feeling towards her, but you're like, okay, I'm old enough to date now. I process this better. Do you feel like you apply that in business?
I don't necessarily think that I apply in business, but it kind of was who I became. Like that's just who I am, I think. And I quickly learned very early on that because of my personality, I need to learn to listen a lot more than I speak. So in group coaching and when I'm having conversations, I've just mastered being an active listener. And I think that really came from growing up, as like I said, an only child, and always being around adults. So because all my siblings live in DR, and because, I grew up with my grandparents and, my aunt, I was always the little kid, the little kid that's always trying to have adult conversations. That was me. Like I was always trying to be in the mix. So I think I grew up very quickly, and I was very old, like a very old spirit. So when I was, dating or when I was in college, I feel like I was always way beyond my years, and I was always thinking about things that people around me weren't necessarily thinking about at the moment. So when I coach, I could take somebody, I don't see them for what they are in the moment. I see them for what they could be long term, because I feel like people always they can't see the bigger picture when they feel like they're drowning. But I'm always the one that tells you, I'm like, you're drowning in a puddle, roll over and you will be fine. So that's where I think it really came from, learning, being around adults and just learning to have those conversations and listening and just basically being nosy for the most part.
Okay. So you tweeted on Monday. You tweeted in response to me you can expect the overlap as far as you and your sibling. Can you tell me out of the 7 of y'all, what are the age differences and how close together you guys are?
Yeah, so only me and my brother that's a couple of months older than me kind of overlap, but my oldest brother and my older sister, like I said, they have the same mom. They're in their early 30s. Then I have, first of all, my dad has to be 60 something, and he's still out here doing the most, but that's neither here nor there. So my oldest siblings are early 30s. Then it's me and my other brother that we're good years apart. Then my youngest brother and the brother that's right after him are a couple of years apart. And then we have our littlest brother who's 9. So there was 2 sets where it was overlapping.
Okay.
Because one of my brothers, my second to last brother, he was conceived when my dad lived with the mom of the brother before him. So it's just homeboy was still with one and then would make baby with another, and then he would move in with her, and then he was just transitioning his way through.
True Rolling Stone fashion. Have you ever had this conversation with your dad? Have you ever asked him what was up with you?
You know what? When I went to DR, we kind of had this conversation. So it's my dad has had such an interesting life. I always tell him he needs to write a book, because the crazy thing is that I still admire my dad, even though I know that he has so many flaws. I feel like he has so many amazing qualities. I remember my dad, being here illegally, and I remember he would, get clothes that would fall off the truck. So I remember he would, get me Diesel jeans and Southern jeans and all of these name brands that people around me didn't have. So I was fly for a couple of years, and it's just I think back to, he worked at a grocery store. He stole socks on the train. He really, really hustled to try to live the American dream. So I always respected that about him. But girl, it's too much. It's too much. When we speak, I think we both kind of just have come to this understanding of, I'm not shit. I don't want that for you as a young woman. I wish I could be different, but this is who I am. These are the cards that we've been dealt, and we kind of just move forward. So when I saw him last, we talked about everything. My dad has lived abroad in Italy for random years, my college years. So we caught up, 11 years of this is graduation, this is what college was like, this is what I did in college, this is what I, so we kind of play catch up. And it's funny because he took me to see all of my siblings. So I saw all of my siblings and all of their moms. And, it was just kind of like a reunion. So I feel like everybody's wounds have kind of healed, and we all just kind of know that it is what it is. So I never necessarily asked him why, because it's just so common for Dominican men to be that. Like, you can ask any Dominican woman about, like, our men, and they'll be like, girl, they ain't shit, don't marry them, they're gonna cheat on you, like, they're gonna have a whole nother family, So it's just so common that it's just kind of like what's understood doesn't need to be explained.
Okay. So you mentioned like being able to understand your mom better once you started dating. How did knowing and learning that your dad was an ancient individual impact the way you chose men? Like, did you intentionally seek people who were different than him, or did you just kind of end up in situations and be like, no, this is not for me, I'm over it?
So the funny, hilarious part of all of this is that I knew what it was, and I still put myself in that same exact situation. So I was in a relationship on and off for 5 years with a Dominican dude who cheated on me for probably 80% of it, right? Like, the whole time. And the crazy thing is like, knowing who my dad was and knowing what my mom went through, I still stayed in that situation because, like I said, my dad taught me to empathize so much that then I was putting myself in his shoes, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe he cheated because of this, or maybe he's cheating because of that, or maybe, I was always trying to justify his behavior. So I just kept staying, and I kept forgiving, and I kept staying, and I kept forgiving, and I kept staying. And I think it really came from the fact that, I had to forgive my dad. And like I said, I could not trade my dad in. So I kind of felt like, I really, really love this person. So I just have to try to make it work the best that I can. But yeah, I didn't really make great dating decisions. I'd say probably I've been cheated on probably most of my relationships, which is why probably I've had so many boyfriends, to be honest. But sometimes I feel like it's like I just attract that sometimes because I am so empathetic and I'm so forgiving and I always just try to be happy-go-lucky. But part of me also feels like so many women have let so many men get away with it that now it's just like, I feel like it's part of culture. I feel like now being cheated on is more common than not being cheated on, and it's sad to say. So it's just kind of something I guess I've learned to deal with and look out for, and not necessarily understand, but be able to recognize.
That's interesting, because while I was listening to you, I'm like, no, that's just us December babies. We want to forgive everybody and move forward. But I agree that as I get older and I look at the women in my life that I've grown up around, that I've made friends with along the way, it really has become a part of the culture to just accept it for what it is. And for me, it's like, okay, I understand that A, B, C, and D is going on in your life, but like, I'm learning now to say, but you don't get to treat me like that. So I think that's important, that once we recognize what's going on, like I love my mother, but it's a whole lot of stuff that she dealt with that I pray I never need the strength for. And I have other relatives, like, I just don't see it. I don't see, like, okay, this person is great, I love him. If y'all separated, I would probably be hurt, but I would want that for you, because some people are a little bit too complacent to me. Like, ma'am, you deserve so much more. You just do.
Right. Yeah, but then I feel like society also makes you feel like, if you really love somebody, you make it work. So then you struggle between the, I love him and I want to make it work, and I know that I deserve better. But if you really love him, then you will make it work. And it's like, well, but I deserve better. So you that kind of have this internal battle of, loyalty versus, choosing yourself.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I keep seeing all these posts about, a dad is a daughter's first love. And then, like, in my IG stories last night, I went to this event called Snaps and Laughs a few weeks ago, and I bought the poetry because there was a line in it, and it was like, you show me a woman who doesn't love her dad, I'll show you a woman who has a hard time trusting a man. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. That sounds very accurate. And I realized that fits me. That description fits me. but I just don't understand why, if that's the societal image that a man is supposed to be his daughter's first love, they don't realize that they are also laying a foundation for the kind of man she'll attract, be it intentionally or unintentionally, going forward. And I just wish that they consider those things.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. You did freeze for a moment, but I hear you.
Hello.
Hello? Okay, now I don't hear or see. Okay, there you go. You're back.
I don't know. Zoom does that. It drops out and then comes back in for weird reasons.
But you're in the airport, I understand.
It happens in my house. Zoom is just raggedy sometimes.
Okay.
All right, so last thing I heard was the line that a woman who doesn't love her dad doesn't trust men, and then we got lost after that.
Okay. So what I was saying is I feel like that particular line in that poem was just so true to who I am. And it just doesn't make sense to me that if society presents this image that a dad is a daughter's first love, how come men don't realize that sooner? Like, I know the first year I was blogging, this guy used to date, had a baby daughter, looked straight like him, like exact same face. I saw this baby and was like, oh, I hope that means he'll treat women better. And then I was just so mad at myself for having that thought. Like, it should not take you having a daughter for you to want to treat women better. The same thing like Jay-Z said, he couldn't understand the perspective of a woman until he had one. Like, you got a mom, bro. You got sisters. So I don't know. And then that makes me wonder if as women we are comfortable having these conversations. So like, I know for me and my brother, even though we didn't grow up together, we are pretty much twins. Like, it's very creepy. We didn't even grow up in the same state. And I talk to him about things, and I'm older by 7 months, so he jokingly calls me little big sister all the time. But he just got married, and I really enjoyed the fact that on his journey to being married, he would call me while he was dating and tell me about the women he was dating when he met her and he fell in love with her. Like, just he trusted me even though we did not have that bond, and we kind of have those conversations. And I started realizing that I need to have that same trust in him and say, hey, you don't get to treat your fiance like that and not your wife like that. Like, would you want somebody to treat me like that? Would you want somebody to treat your other sister like that? Like, that's not cool.
It's so funny because I was saying, what was it? Was it a meme? I don't know if it was a meme or whatever, but it was like, you deserve better, sis. And it's just like, everybody, the internet wants to tell us that we deserve better, but they don't give us the spaces to have the right kinds of conversations, right? Because I feel like it wasn't until I went to therapy and it wasn't until I started having these conversations with my friends that my relationship started changing, right? So when I was like in that 5-year relationship, my friends never like really came out and said like, this isn't healthy. They just kind of, like when you're in college, you're just like, oh girl, well, we tell you he ain't shit. Oh, y'all act together. You kind of just let your friends do what it is, and you don't want to opine on their relationships. You're like, oh, that's not my business. But I think now that as we get older, my friends are very vocal, like when they see a red flag, and I'm very open to hearing that, So I feel like, we don't need to be telling people that they deserve better, but we need to be giving them the spaces to understand where they are in, the context of their lives, A lot of times the people that you date are a relationship of who you are at the time.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that open and honestness with your friends comes with age, or did that openness come from therapy?
No, I think it came with age. I think my friends and I have always been close, and I feel like just as we've gotten older, like our conversations have changed with time. Like when we were in college, we talked about something. When we were recent grads, we talked about other things. So I feel like it's just being comfortable in womanhood and in trusting one another with, you know, what we consider to be secrets or insecurities or disappointments, and knowing that the other person isn't going to judge you and is going to love you the same.
I asked that because I know one of my friends, she's a little bit older than me. Like, I grew up similar to you. My mom had me at 16, so everybody was an adult in my life. But anyway, my friend is a little bit older than me, and we were having this conversation about sex and sexual health, but not like, oh, girl, that's like, you know, we were just having a conversation. She was like, you know, she felt like she didn't have those conversations when she was my age, and she's feeling like she's just getting to a point where she's comfortable having those conversations. Whereas for me, you know, it depends on the person. My mom and my aunt were open to having those conversations my whole life, so it just depends on how open the friend is. I don't necessarily feel that discomfort. So I was just wondering for you whether it was an age thing or was it, you know, what other factors feeds in.
Yeah, like I said, I definitely think that it's age. It's a lot of it. Age, like, it's just as you get older and as you get more comfortable in yourself as you are as a woman, and your friends also do the same, I feel like your conversations change. But it also came out of me because, like, according to my grandparents and my aunt, like, first of all, they probably think that I'm still a virgin. Like, even though I live with my boyfriend, like, they be playing new games. They foolish. So I think in their eyes, you know, like, just like sex and relationships and stuff like that isn't something that I really talked to them about until probably after I graduated college. And the conversation was, make sure you use a condom. Like, it was never like, for real. Like, you know how some people are like really close to their mom and they like, or their family members, and they be like telling them all the tea. Like, my mom knows my life on Instagram. Like, that's how she knows what's going on, you know. So I think my friends are the outlet of the people I turn to for like advice or opinions or and stuff like that. And side note, my mom and my aunt are both social workers, licensed, psychology degrees. Like, y'all not about to diagnose me. I don't got time. I don't. Because my aunt will be like, well, what you have is disassociative. I'm like, you know, sis, I don't need this from you right now. I was just trying to tell you about how Kevin didn't respond to my text. Like, I don't need this. So I kind of like turned to my friends for that.
No, that's funny that you mentioned like some people having closer relationships with their mom than others. Because my mom had me at 16, I felt like she kind of overdid her favorite line is, "I'm your mom, not your friend." But just so many things that I know about her, I feel like I shouldn't know about her, or even I should know them now at 26, but I probably should not know them when I learned them. And I think it's just, you know, different people have different parenting practices, and you just go with what you know. My aunt told me later, because my mom and my aunt are 6 years apart, so my aunt is older than my mom, and she was saying that my grandmother was not very affectionate with them, and she didn't have those conversations, so they both kind of really had those conversations. And for me, I was just like a nerd in a book. I was like, can I just read about it? Like, you gave me the book, you know, I don't want to hear. So I didn't have social workers, but I did have very talkative family members that were like, okay, so have you kissed anyone? Like, what? Why are we having this conversation?
Yeah, no. My parents and my family, they tried to just pretend that, like, I did not interact with the opposite sex at all. Like, they just tried to pretend it wasn't a thing.
And how do you feel like that led you to do one thing or another? Like, okay, they felt like you weren't doing it, so you were just like, whatever, or do you feel like it made you want to do it more because they were not having those conversations?
No, I don't think it made me want to do it more. I feel like I just spent a lot of my teenage years like tiptoeing around, like hiding what I did and like hiding, you know, like we knew I had a boyfriend, but like they wouldn't know. Like, for example, when I was in high school, I was on the cheerleading team, right? But I don't know if it's like I had dropped out of the cheerleading squad or like the season was over. But more of the story is my family thought that every Tuesday and Thursday I was at cheerleading practice when I was right. So it was like I was doing all of these things to get over on them or to hide things from them because they wanted to shelter me so much. And I feel like not necessarily that it backfired because I didn't like go crazy, but I feel like I was naive in a lot of areas, and a lot of things I learned the hard way because we never had those conversations. So for me, I feel like had my mom talked to me about, you know, what her and my dad went through, I feel like I would have been able to see the red flags of cheating sooner than they came. But it took me 5 years to get it together because it just wasn't a conversation that was had, you know.
Okay. Well, I know you need to board your plane soon. Are you open to answering some questions from our guests?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so Tish or Janice, if you have any questions, we got about 5 more minutes before Emily needs to start winding down and board her plane. Feel free. You guys know how to unmute. We do this every Thursday.
Every Thursday.
Yeah, we be on these Circle of Greatness calls every Thursday night.
Oh, with Neo.
Yeah, that mute and unmute game. You got to be on it. Did either of you have any questions, ladies?
Yeah.
I definitely can relate to everything. My dad, like Emily, I'm my mother's only child, but my father had 3 boys before me, and then there was a questionable sister. So at this point, we just call each other sisters. We don't actually know the T. So I definitely can relate to all of that. I guess I'm just wondering, now that you can kind of see and identify, I guess I do have a question. Now that you can kind of see and identify traits, have you been making better choices? Because I feel like I'm now at 28. I'm like, I can see and identify how I was picking men based off of my relationship with my father. And I still don't know that I'm necessarily making better choices or not. So I'm just wondering if you can see yourself making better choices, or it's just
So I will say this. I feel like as we mature, we continue to make better choices. I feel like men, however, they are like roaches, right? Like the bug spray will only work for so long, but some of it's gonna get smarter and faster. So I think that even though as we grow and continue to make better choices, I don't feel like choices are gonna make us completely free of her or completely free of choosing the wrong person, because the same way that you're trying to make better choices is the same way that other person also has an agenda. So 2 people with 2 different agendas can always, mislead. So I definitely think, it's easier to know the one that sounds like, I know if I quote on my way, my love game is strong. And my move-on game is super strong. Like, we would be broken up on July 20th, on July 23rd, I'll be in a whole nother relationship on Instagram. But yeah, I don't necessarily, think that like I said, all of those lessons will not that they won't make a difference, but I feel like even knowing what we know, you are still gonna run into foolery, for lack of a better word.
Feel you.
Janice, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I don't know that I really have a question. I've just kind of been listening to you guys. I'm like, I guess the best way to say it is just that I have a really, really bad relationship with my father. We just had like a big, like kind of blowout about 2 months ago. I still live with like my parents, and I help them like, pay bills and all that fun stuff. And we had this big blowout because we were cleaning, me and my brother and sister were cleaning the house, and we threw out something of his, and he like flipped out and like threw all my stuff out in the trash. Like he's that kind of, yeah. So like right now I'm just at the point where I'm kind of keeping him at a distance. Like I have like kind of my own like mental health things kind of going on, which might also go back to our relationship. Like I have depression. I tried to commit suicide about a decade ago. So at this point, I'm just kind of keeping him at like arms, legs, another arm kind of length, just kind of stay over there as much as possible. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. So I just wanted to hear, I guess, someone else's perspective on what their relationship is like with their father. He also does, the whole running around, like we don't see him for like a week or so at a time kind of thing.
So
He's Dominican? He sounds Dominican to me.
He's not.
When I hear you say that, Janice, what it made me think about, as far as Emily's story, was that you go to therapy. Like, what made you seek out therapy?
I actually haven't been. I actually would like to go. I keep saying, oh yeah, I'm gonna, get myself together to go. I just haven't. I just kind of do a lot of introspection. And I studied. I was studying psychology a little bit. I'm an artist, but along with my art degree, I was also studying a little bit of psychology. So I kind of read through everything like that.
I would definitely recommend Talkspace. So it's actually like a therapy app, and what they do is they match you with a therapist, and then based on the plan, you do like text check-ins, if like in the actual app, or you do like video check-ins as well. So I feel like that was something that helped me, because sometimes you like get in your head, and it's important to have somebody else be able to put it all into perspective for you. So for me, like when I go through, bad times or like difficult times, the therapist always helps to like point out the good things. Like, okay, well, you're going through this, but have you thought about this, or have you seen this? So they might help you look at your situation in a different way, because since you're in it every single day, sometimes it could feel like you're drowning and like you don't even know when you're going to come up for air. Versus the therapist to be like, oh, look, these are all of these examples of oxygen in your life, so you don't always feel like you're suffocated in negativity.
Thank you. I'm gonna take that out.
Yeah, and it's cheap too, because I don't have insurance, child. I'm an entrepreneur, I don't got time to pay Trump. But I feel like, I want to say it's like $49 or something like that. Like it's pretty affordable compared to what you would pay, like a regular therapist for a weekly session.
Okay.
Awesome. You're gonna get through this, girl.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then you can also, we know other people, Denise. I'll just say that there's
Right.
always people you can reach out to until you feel comfortable to do Talkspace. So you have like 4 minutes before you need to get on this plane. I want to ask the question: what made you come up with this title? Because I was like, hey, I saw your post about your dad. I didn't realize that long ago until I went on your Instagram page looking for it. But what made you have the title, What My Cheating Ass Daddy Taught Me About Empathy? Like, you were ready with that. Like, oh, yeah, sure.
Because, like I said, I still love my dad. I still respect my dad. I still admire parts of my dad. And I feel like sometimes when someone hurts you or when someone has a character flaw, we tend to only look at them through the lens of that character flaw, right? So, for example, for me, I took the color personality. So I'm a red personality, and reds are like very straightforward. We don't have tact. Like, we just like, this is what it is, like it or not, bad bitch, leave. And I feel like when somebody sees something about you, like, oh, well, she's a bitch, they always see you in the lens of being a bitch. When you cheat, people always see you in the lens of being a cheater, but it's just kind of like, there's so much more to that person, that one specific character flaw. So my dad, like I said, always taught me to look at people like where they're going and not necessarily where they are. So it's a lot easier for me, like I said, to move on or to forgive or to understand relationships, because even though, yes, my dad hurt all these women, and like I said, it has such a negative ripple effect, at the end of the day, it doesn't take away from the goodness that he does have in him, right? So yeah, he may be 40% not shit, but we cannot ignore the 60% of goodness in him. So I feel like I always put myself in the shoes of other people, like, okay, you hurt me, but let me try to see where it came from, and what good characteristics I can appreciate instead of just focusing on the negative stuff.
Well, with that being said, thank you so much for staying a month ago and still being available from the airport. And thank you to Letitia and Denise for joining us. I want you to catch your flight. I appreciate the conversation this evening. I really learned a lot more about me listening to you, and a lot more about you because you shared, but just a lot of things that I reflected on. I went and pre-wrote everything here. But to you all who have joined, click the link in my IG bio, subscribe, that way you have access to these calls. I have a wonderful guest scheduled for next month, and I hope that we can continue to do this with each other. Have a safe flight, M. Bye, Tish. Bye, Denise. Have a great weekend.
Bye, guys.
DaaamnDaddy.com for more info.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, y'all.